I always knew my stepbrother Jason had a knack for making me feel small. It wasn't just the usual sibling rivalry or teasing, it was a calculated game he seemed to enjoy playing, one where he always had the upper hand. Growing up, I looked up to him in a way. I mean, he had the confidence, the charisma, the everything that seemed to make him successful. At least, that's how he made it look. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one. The one who worked hard and stayed out of the spotlight. And that worked for me. But it didn't stop Jason from mocking me for every little thing I did. It started with the usual, "You're never going to amount to much," and "Don't you want to get a real job?" What got under my skin, though, was when Jason openly mocked my job. He'd laugh, tell me how I was just another cog in the machine, and act like his own job at the family company was the real path to success. It hurt, but I always bit my tongue. I mean, what was the point? Who was I to challenge someone so successful in his eyes? But one day, something clicked. It wasn't just his words anymore, it was the way he treated me. The condescending remarks, the subtle jabs at my work ethic, the smug superiority. It all came to a head when I overheard him speaking to one of his colleagues about me. He didn't even try to hide it. "You know my stepbrother? He'll never get anywhere. It's cute that he thinks his job matters, but honestly, he's never going to climb the ladder. That's just not the life for someone like him." I heard it loud and clear. My blood boiled, but I didn't react. Not right away. Because what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been planning something, quietly building up a plan that would change everything. I had been watching, waiting, gathering knowledge about everything that mattered. And now, it was time to strike. Looking back, I realized that Jason had been setting the stage for years. It wasn't just the casual jabs he made at my job or his constant bragging about his position at the family business. It was the subtle way he made me feel inferior. Jason was the golden child, and everyone, including our parents, reinforced that image. He was the firstborn, the one who always got the better treatment. We were both born into a family with a successful business, but Jason was the one who was groomed to take it over. He worked at the company throughout college, learning everything about how things worked. He'd talk about how his vision for the company was the future, how he was going to expand and innovate. He'd always talk about how he was the next big thing, and everyone seemed to believe it. Then there was me, just the quiet, bookish kid who worked hard at a normal job trying to build something on my own. I wasn't looking for fame, fortune, or recognition. But Jason never let me forget that I was just an outsider in the world he and our parents had created. My job, a mere afterthought compared to the family business. But the more Jason mocked my work, the more I started to question something. Was I really the one who was stuck? Was he truly as successful as he thought he was? Or was he just a big fish in a small pond? I knew deep down that there was more to success than just bragging about it. It wasn't until I found out about the company's financial struggles that I realized something was seriously off. Jason, despite all his boasting, was actually running the business into the ground. I discovered this by accident. I'd been doing some research for a personal project, and in doing so, I ended up stumbling across some financial records that Jason had left unattended. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The company was deep in debt, its profits were falling, and Jason's decisions were contributing to its steady decline. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How could someone so confident, so sure of themselves, be so blind to the mess he was making? But this was exactly the moment I realized what I needed to do. I had the leverage now, something I never thought the power to take control. Jason didn't know it yet, but his mocking attitude had sealed his fate. The more I thought about it, the more I began to realize the depth of my plan. It wasn't just about proving him wrong or showing him I could make something of myself. It was about taking what was rightfully mine, the chance to make a difference, to be in control, and in some ways to teach Jason a lesson he wouldn't forget. But of course, there was the problem of getting the company first. Jason wasn't stupid. He would never sell it to me willingly. The only way to take control was to play the long game. I had to carefully strategize my move, learn more about the company's dealings, and wait for the perfect moment. That moment came sooner than I expected. One evening, Jason let his guard down during a casual conversation. He bragged about the big deal he was about to make with a potential investor. I could see the arrogance in his eyes as he spoke about it. He was certain the deal was going through, but I knew otherwise. I had a hunch that his confidence was masking the cracks in the foundation. The deal wasn't going to save the company. It was just another one of his desperate attempts to keep the wheels turning. I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. This was my moment. The more I learned about the family business, the clearer it became that Jason was in over his head. His once glowing reputation was starting to fade behind the scenes, and it was only a matter of time before the truth caught up with him. But the more I dug, the more I realized just how fragile the situation was, and how I could use that to my advantage. I started with small steps. I kept track of Jason's financial moves, his meetings, and the deals he was bragging about. I had access to the company's records, but I needed more. Insider information, something Jason thought no one could get their hands on. So, I began building relationships with people inside the company, quietly observing the key players, the decision makers, and the ones who were genuinely loyal to the company. I made sure they knew I was there to stay, that I wasn't just some outsider. I began to uncover the real problems. Jason had made some questionable decisions, pushing away investors, ignoring crucial advice from experts, and stubbornly sticking to his outdated vision. His arrogance and self-confidence clouded his judgment, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. But here's the thing, I wasn't just going to let the company fall into ruin. I wasn't going to watch Jason destroy everything our family had built. Instead, I started looking for a way to get my hands on it, without him suspecting anything. One night, over drinks, Jason casually mentioned that the company was seeking a new round of investors. He was looking for someone to buy into the business and help fund some of the bigger projects he had in mind. He even laughed about how he was so close to closing the deal. That was my opening. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the easiest way to take control of the company wasn't just to buy a few shares, it was to buy the whole damn thing. I started doing the research. The company's valuation, its debt, and the flaws in its structure were all laid out in front of me. I knew this was my moment, but I also knew I had to be careful. If Jason caught wind of my plans, it would ruin everything. He had a way of dismissing me as just a nobody in the family business, but what he didn't know was that I was getting smarter, more strategic. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started falling into place. There was a way I could buy him out, take control, and flip everything around. Jason was getting too cocky. He thought he had it all figured out, but I knew better. His ego would be his downfall. But how could I make sure this would work? How could I ensure I wasn't just another victim of Jason's arrogance? I had to do it without him ever knowing I was planning my next move. That meant watching, waiting, and quietly pulling all the strings. The first real step came when I started making moves behind Jason's back. I contacted a few investors I knew and began discussing the possibility of taking over the company. I didn't reveal my full plan to them yet. I just needed them on board when the time came. The groundwork was being laid. Still, there was one major obstacle: Jason's unwavering confidence. He was still too sure of himself. He didn't even see me as a threat. That made it easier for me to maneuver behind the scenes without raising suspicion. But everything changed the moment Jason made one crucial mistake. He got too comfortable. He stopped checking the company's finances as closely as he once did. He stopped caring about the little things, assuming that he was untouchable. He was making decisions based on gut feelings, not facts. And that was where I saw my opportunity. I began to notice how Jason's decisions were affecting the business negatively. He was making rash moves, and I knew it wouldn't take long before it all came crashing down. I began preparing my plan, quietly, strategically, knowing full well that this was my one shot to take everything he had. As I watched him from the sidelines, it became clear that the moment to strike was fast approaching. The day I had been planning for finally arrived. Everything had come together perfectly. The investors were on board, the financial records were in my favor, and Jason was still blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. He thought he was untouchable, still walking around with the same smug, arrogant attitude, as though his position at the company was guaranteed for life. But he didn't know I had been quietly maneuvering behind the scenes. He had underestimated me, and I was about to make sure he realized just how wrong he had been. It was a regular Tuesday when everything changed. I had already set up a meeting with the investors, and now it was time to confront Jason. He was in his office as usual, deep in his ego-driven daydreams about his supposed success. He barely even noticed when I walked in, carrying the paperwork that would change everything. "Jason," I said, my voice steady, though inside I was buzzing with anticipation. "We need to talk." He looked up, half smiling, as if he already knew what was coming. "Oh, it's you. What's up now? Another one of your ideas?" I ignored the sarcasm in his voice and handed him the folder. "Take a look at these." Jason flicked through the papers carelessly, his expression going from confident to confused. "What is this? Why are you showing me these?" he asked, clearly not grasping the significance of what I was about to do. I leaned back in the chair across from him. "Those are the documents that prove the company's situation is far worse than you think. The debts, the bad investments, the bad decisions you've been making. You're sinking this ship, Jason. And I'm here to make sure it doesn't go down with you at the helm." His face flushed as he looked through the records. He was beginning to understand, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to undermine me," he said, slamming the folder down on the desk. I could see the panic behind his words. Jason was no longer in control. For the first time, I could see the cracks in his facade. He wasn't the confident, arrogant person I had always seen. No, now he was desperate, trying to salvage what he could, but it was too late. "You've been so sure of yourself, haven't you?" I said calmly. "You've run the company into the ground with your arrogance and inability to see the truth. You thought you were untouchable, but I've been quietly gathering the evidence to take over." Jason stood up, face pale. You can't do this. This is my company. I've built it." I smiled, finally feeling the weight of what I had achieved. "No, you've built nothing. You inherited it, you've mismanaged it, and now it's mine. I bought the majority shares this morning, Jason. I own the company now." His jaw dropped. The reality hit him hard. The smug, arrogant person who had always belittled me was now powerless. I had become his boss. "But that's not all," I continued. "I've already spoken with the investors. We're moving forward with a new plan, and you won't be leading it. In fact, I'm giving you a generous exit package, but it's time for you to leave the company." Jason stumbled back, his face now a mix of rage and disbelief. He opened his mouth to say something, but words failed him. It was clear, his world had just crumbled, and he didn't know how to process it. "You think this is a joke? You can't just walk in here and take everything from me," he spat, his voice shaking with fury. I stood up and looked him dead in the eyes. "I didn't take anything from you, Jason. You gave it to me. You thought I was a joke. You thought you could keep me down, but all you did was set me up for this moment." The silence in the room was deafening. Jason's anger was palpable, but I could see the fear behind his eyes. He knew he had lost. Not just his job, but his reputation, his status, and his future. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "By the way, you might want to pack up. I've already called the board. We're starting fresh without you. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I walked out of his office, a sense of satisfaction and triumph filling me. I had done it. Everything had led to this moment, and it was mine. Jason was now the one who had to figure out how to survive without the empire he thought was invincible. The dust settled quickly after the confrontation with Jason. I had done what I set out to do, but it wasn't just about taking over the company, it was about proving to myself and to Jason that I wasn't the joke he always thought I was. I had the power now, and the satisfaction of watching him scramble to regain his footing was enough to make all the hard work worth it. But the aftermath of everything didn't just affect Jason, it had a ripple effect throughout the company and our family. Jason's exit was far messier than I ever anticipated. Initially, he tried to make himself appear as a victim, telling anyone who would listen that he was wronged. But when the board members and the key investors backed me up, it became clear to everyone that he was just a man who got too comfortable in a role he couldn't handle. The media didn't help either. They painted him as a failed heir, someone who couldn't lead the company into the future, while I was now seen as the person who was going to save the business. The company had always been in turmoil under Jason's leadership, but with my new direction, things started improving almost immediately. We began to focus on more innovative projects. I implemented better management systems, stronger financial controls, and more importantly, I brought in new talent that was eager to move the company forward. The results were quick, and within a few months, the company started turning a profit. What Jason had failed to do over the years, I was accomplishing in record time. As for Jason, he wasn't just out of a job, he was out of his element. I offered him an exit package, but when he refused, things got uglier. He ended up in a legal battle to try and claim a piece of the company back, but it was clear that he didn't have a leg to stand on. The court sided with me, and the final blow came when he was forced to sell his remaining shares. Watching him lose everything was bittersweet. As much as I had dreamt of seeing him fail, I didn't realize how empty the victory would feel. Jason's stubbornness, his arrogance, and his inability to see beyond himself had cost him everything he had built. But now there was no room for pity. The family, on the other hand, was divided. Jason's reputation had been tarnished, and my parents struggled with the fact that I had taken control of the company they had always hoped Jason would run. At first, they didn't fully understand my decision. They called me ruthless, even asked me if I thought it was worth it. But deep down, I knew they were proud of me. They just didn't want to admit it. They had seen Jason's behavior for years, but never had the courage to stand up to him. It was easier for them to look the other way. I wasn't willing to make excuses anymore. I wasn't just taking the company. I was taking control of my future. The final piece of the puzzle was my own growth. In the months following the takeover, I saw a side of myself I hadn't recognized before. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked kid anymore. I was a leader, someone who had earned his place. I wasn't trying to prove anything to Jason anymore. I was proving it to myself. And now, the company reflected that confidence. I didn't look back. Jason had tried to break me, mock me, and underestimate me for years, but in the end, I came out on top. He was nothing but a distant memory, and as for me, I was the one who held the power. I was the one who had rebuilt what Jason had almost destroyed. In the end, this wasn't just a victory over him. It was a victory over all the doubts, all the jabs, and all the times I was told I'd never make it. Jason lost, and I won. Not just the company, but my own redemption.